Hello, everyone. To get my chat up in a moment. There we go. All right, I can see your chats now. And so, good morning, Art, and everyone. Okay, good morning. How are you doing? It's good to see you. The world is good when I see you here, Art. I know. I'm getting to the point in my life when it it's starting to get tougher to do this, especially when we have have our offices downstairs. So um, if I go for a walk, as I did this morning, I start to get into problems with my legs. Um, but I'm all right. We're here, and um, I probably can manage this for another year or two. That's my current plan, anyway. And so, anyway, I'm going to go find where we are. We're going to be reading about Nietzsche today, and I'll just give a couple more minutes for people to join me. Um, and so we've been reading from Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Murray Stein and Thomas Arst. And this was the brainchild of Thomas Arst, who had a PhD in physics, not in psychology. But he also he went through sort of a crisis point, I guess, in his own life, and ultimately, and he came to a retreat center in the Black Forest, and that straightened him out. And then over time, he became the executive director of that center and became a very close follower of Carl Jung. And it was him that pushed Murray Stein into doing uh, at least the first book. These books are a series. There are now 5 of them in the series. Hello. Hello, Jordan. We made it.
Morning.
Oh. Now 5 books in the series, and Thomas Arst lived to see 4 of them published, and worked on the 5th one, but the 5th one came out after his death. He was one of the early deaths from COVID on Easter Sunday in 2020. And it's very sad because he and I had become friends, and he had invited me to come to the Aranos conference, but unfortunately, that conference had to be uh, canceled and postponed for a year. So something there is in the universe that didn't want me to go to Aranos. We're creating our own Aranos here. This is an Aranos for laymen. Um,
There's air in my nose. That'll.
Say it again.
There's air in my nose instead of air nose.
Okay. Yes. So anyway, we're moving along. We had our first day of school yesterday, Friday, and it was an easy day because we didn't have kids, and we don't have until a week from tomorrow. Um,
In service day, but
pardon?
in service day, or
Well, it was a day of setting up our classrooms and our offices because
okay.
we just moved into this building over the summer, and none of us knew anything about the building really. I mean, I had been there a couple of times before and so knew it, but I didn't know how vast this building really is. It's quite amazing, actually.
Wow.
And it's obvious why they wanted to switch switch buildings on us because our old building is certainly adequate for the kids that they have now who used to be in our building. And we are expanding because we have kids coming along who were COVID kids and they have some issues that we have to deal with. So anyway, we're halfway through this essay, which is entitled um, "In a World That Has Gone Mad, Is What We Really Need," a red book by Paul Bishop. And so Paul started to go through some of the uh, psychological theory last week, and we went through Plato and some of those people, but we're up to Nietzsche now. And I didn't want to start Nietzsche last week, but here he is. So I am on page 132 of this book, and
You know, something
or,
just came to me. Something just came to me that in a world that has gone mad, is what we really need, and then etc. Well, I think that poses a really important question, especially in these times where we have, so much sensationalism, so much propaganda, so much truth right out there, but picking and choosing can be a discerning nightmare.
yeah,
And there's a point with the craziness and the madness where when desperate times happen, it's not that it deserves desperate measures. It's stay the course and stay strong and simple instead of reacting. So I think
yep,
that is what we need. I think what we need is to keep sight of our priorities in these kind of madness of times so that we are Rock of Gibraltar unmoved and don't let our emotions dictate how we feel. So
yep,
that way, I think there's a strength in that statement. The question that is kind of hidden in the question of, well, should we give that up, or is this dumb or extravagant or folly? When in reality, in times like this, that's the best time to stand up and not have a weak generation, not have people just, I guess the old quote, the sheep live their life in fear of the wolf, only to be eaten by the shepherd. So, be careful of who you're aligning with.
yeah. Well, that's certainly true. And I saw a delightful movie last night on you know, I guess it was Netflix, but it might have been in one of the other streaming services. But it's called Arthur the King, and it has Mark Wahlberg in it, and it's
I've seen that.
you have seen it,
Yeah.
and it's about what the Great Adventure Race or adventure racing, and these teams of four people have to um, race over 435 miles in multiple and jungle and cliffs and rivers and swimming and all kinds of stuff. Um, and they're doing it in the Dominican Republic, which which was a little bit challenging, quite challenging, in fact. And at one point, they had to take a zip line that was falling apart. And but in the course of it, a dog,
I was
uh,
gonna say the dog.
pardon,
I was gonna say the dog. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like the
yeah, it's
bane.
really about the dog and the fact that the character that Mark Wahlberg played, who was a real life character, that's a true story. Um, they had a stray dog that latched onto them, and among other things, it saved their life in the
Hmm.
dark at one point because he sensed that there was a cliff that the humans didn't sense, and they would have gone right off the cliff if they hadn't paid attention to the dog. So it was a cool story. It's a nice
Yeah,
dog story for a Sunday night,
yeah,
and it's called Arthur the King. Anyway, and Arthur was ultimately imported into the U.S. And lived happily ever after. So that's the good news. It's a feel-good story in the end.
yeah.
So uh, Nietzsche. We're going to read about Nietzsche here. Let me just see. Okay, the figure of Nietzsche is the title of the section. The figure of Dionysus, associated by Schelling with madness, would become an important motif in the work of Nietzsche, and indeed Jung. In Beyond Good and Evil, paragraph 156, for instance, Nietzsche observed in an aphorism whose relevance for our time hardly needs underlining that madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule. In a draft of this aphorism, Nietzsche appended the comment, and this is why historians up to now have not talked about madness. But at some stage, medical doctors will write history, and Nietzsche saw himself as just such a medical doctor, writing in 1881 that moral judgments are epidemics which have their time, and offering in On Genealogy of Morals a psychological account of the history of morality. Equally, in The Antichrist, Nietzsche tried to describe the history of Christianity in medieval terms, writing, uh, to be physicians here, to be inexorable here, to wield the scalpel here, that is our part. That is our love of man. That is how we are philosophers, we Hyperboreans. And that's from paragraph 7. In fact, in an earlier work, Daybreak, Nietzsche had already investigated the significance of madness in some detail. In the course of a long aphorism titled Significance of Madness in the History of Morality, Nietzsche explicitly refers to the passage in the Phaedrus where Plato describes madness as the means through which the greatest good have come to Greece. He also alludes to the discovery of the dithyramb through Archilochus of Paros in the 7th century BC, recorded in a fragment preserved by Athenaeus of Naucratis in his Depnosophist. Okay. Uh, I know how to lead the fair song of Lord Dionysus, the dithyramb, when my wits are fused with wine. Now this idea recurs in earlier Platonic dialogue, the Ion, which Socrates maintains that in Ion, where Socrates maintains that the muse first makes men inspired, and then through these inspired ones, others share in the enthusiasm. And so a chain is formed. For the epic poets, all the good ones have their excellence not from art, but are inspired, possessed, and thus they utter all these admirable poems. And so it is also with the good lyric poets, as the worshiping Corybantes are not in their senses when they dance, as the lyric poets are not in their senses when they make these lovely lyric poems. On this account, the poet becomes a voice for the deity. Herein lies the reason why the deity has has bereft them of their senses and uses them as ministers along with soothsayers and godly seers. It is in order that we listeners may now we may know that we listeners may know that it is not they who utter these precious revelations, while their mind is not within them, but it is the God Himself who speaks, and through them perhaps articulate to us. For evidence of this, worked in practices, Socrates points to the case of Tyrannicus of Chalcis, who never composed a single poem worth recalling, save the song of praise which everyone repeats. Well now, well nigh the finest of all lyrical poems, and absolutely what he called it, an invention of the muses. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute and just see what you have to say about it. So
I
far.
think talking the dithyramb, I looked that up. That was new to me. And it's a poem or hymn that's passionate or inflated, that typically is a hymn to Dionysus. So, new word for me. Don't know how much that'll come up in normal conversation, but I think this whole, you're out of your mind, bereft of your senses, where in a sense you're experiencing the all, the capital A-L, A-L-L. And I think that divinity of the universe that causes creativity to give form to the formless, the unconscious being the formless, and then pour the heart of the matter into the vessel, as it would be, onto the paper in a doodle, or in words and symbols as a poem or a hymn. And that this Tynnicus of Chalcis or Chalcis never composed a single poem worth recalling, save the song of praise which everyone repeats. Well nigh the finest of all lyrical poems, invention of the muses. And so it's one of those, Edison thing. I kind of, you fail 10,000 times and then you have the light bulb, or you fail 10,000 times and you steal the idea of the light bulb from Tesla. I mean, however, you look at the history, but it's the thing of don't stop. There's the invention of the muses is the continual living, Colleen's third quadrant, bottom left, place of creation, that's constantly either filling like magma in a volcano, or emanating, emerging like lava as it moves out. And so I think the invention of the muses, it's an interesting concept, I think, here, where people often say, oh, we're not ourselves, when I think we're more of ourselves. I think there's a false sense of humility of, oh, I shouldn't take credit for any of that, I was out of my head. I'm like, wow, okay, well, then someone else is gonna. And I think you start to learn, then get your driver's license for how to be out of your head. And I think, like you've said, people will turn to drugs or alcohol and try to reinduce the experience. But I think what's interesting is they're trying to reinduce something that's already occurred. You never can. You have to have it now in the present. Otherwise, you have the anxiety of, I'll never get there again, future, or, you're living in the past, and that's kind of dragging you down into depression. So I think this invention of the muses, if people would take the wheel, even when it's on ice and you're spinning around, just take the wheel And honestly, surrender to action rather than just giving up. Oh, the video's frozen. There we go. Your video, the video froze. Mine or yours? I can't hear you.
I cannot hear you, Jordan.
There you are. Now I hear you.
We had a brief interruption, and you went off at the time where you said, like you said, and then I don't know what I said.
Oh, I think like you
And
said.
I can't hear you. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Not hearing you.
No.
Nope. What's happened here?
Huh. This is. Let me leave and come back.
Let's try one thing. I'm going to intentionally mute you and then ask you to unmute from there.
Is that working?
Not hearing you.
No.
Okay.
And then
Is anybody on YouTube hearing me? Okay. Christopher says he hears both of us, but sadly, I do not hear Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan. Now you're muted again.
can you hear me now?
Cannot hear you.
No.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm sorry to say this, but I think we're going to have to reboot because I can't hear Jordan after that interruption. So I'm going to end this call and restart it in 15 seconds, and you'll need to log on for YouTube. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we